But my name's Andrew Mansfield, and I'm the Assistant Academic Coordinator, a pre-doctoral researcher here as well in the Sigmund Freud Private University School of Law. And I'm excited. It looks like we've got a good audience. I want to answer questions. I want to go through everything we can today to make sure if you know whether or not this program is exactly what you're looking for, if it's the next step that'll help you in your career, and answer questions about the program itself. But tonight I thought before we dive into the program, I would ask a general question, and thank you to the folks here in the audience. I'm very glad to see as many people as we have online. And we'll make sure everyone can ask questions as we go along. So the first question is, whoops, are we getting a little bit of a feedback loop from somebody? Does it sound better? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. The first question is, I always like to ask, and again, when you start your very first course here, the same question will be on the table, which is, what is international law? I think it's your voice. This is a program in public international law, and so often that's a very different topic for people to come to. It's an unusual topic, to say the least, because we use the word law. But what do we mean by this? It's the law of nations, right? It only goes back to Hugo Grotius, and I had the pleasure of seeing his statue in the Netherlands not too long ago. But in 1625, he's attributed to be the founder. Let's not use a patriarchal word. He's the father, but he's the founder of public international law. And so some people will dispute that. It goes back to the 14 and 1500s. But the question is this: he was the first systematizer. And what he said is that we're dealing with a system, and this has stayed true to this day. We're dealing with a system that has no centralized authority, right? No actual enforcement mechanism. And when we look at that kind of a decentralized system and call it law, the question is, what are we dealing with? Can it constrain power? Does it constrain power? What impact does it have on the world today? And so I just want to start, before I even hit the first slide, with Article 38. One of our professors here will push this into your mind as much as possible. He says it's the thing that you must wake up at night if somebody calls you on the phone and says, what is international law? This is the thing you must remember, but it's Article 38. Article 38 of the International Court of Justice gives us a non-hierarchical list of what we're going to look at. Now you'll see that when I flip through to the sources of public international law. That's a topic that you'll explore in detail, but you're going to look at treaties, right? This thing called custom. General principles. We no longer use the word of civilized nations. Now we say of the community of nations, even though the statute still has the kind of pre-colonial term that we need to excise. Those are the things that we look at in determining if states to states can rule themselves in a community without an enforcement mechanism. But we'll also look at what does it mean today that we've decided that not only does international law go sideways, but international law goes up and down. And what I mean by that is that we've got human rights on top of this whole system. These are the things that you'll study. So let me show you the courses. Let me explain that we're going to go over the program, the partners. You obviously know that this is a UNITAR affiliated program. What does that mean? The core curriculum, we have 8 main courses that you'll go through. Those are some of them in the VIC, some of them at the law school. The United Nations modules, these during the year, including the very first that starts 28 September, are meant to give you more practitioner experience, more reality experience. What is it like to be in the field of public international law? And then, of course, the courses count as a full European master's degree in combination with UNITAR, so that you can pursue a PhD or move into all kinds of career options after this. We'll go through the site visits. This is one of the things that the folks who were here this year, we expanded. We're going to expand even more next year. Vienna itself, I like to say, can be the classroom in essence. We have so many organizations here, not only the United Nations, just across the river from where we're standing, but also, as you'll see, numerous international organizations that one could seek, we'll talk about that, employment, internships, relationships with, based on being embedded, being here, making sure that this is something that you can both be to, either remote, hybrid, or in person, some combination, that it gives you the exposure. And we'll talk about the thesis. Of course, we'll talk about the thesis. Everyone's favorite topic. Each year, the folks who come through the program are getting even better and better at doing this. It's a very intensive 50, 60 page, personally selected research topic that is one of the elements to graduate. So we'll go over those requirements again. Okay, so let's start with the program. I like to say 1 degree, 2 institutions. That's because UNITAR, as we said, UNITAR goes back to 1963, and in the decolonial period, it was founded. It's a General Assembly resolution affiliated organization, founded it first to train in diplomacy and train international relations, international law for emerging states. What has it become? It has become, and is becoming more consolidated to be, the United Nations Training Center. Even when we see the reorganization happening today, I think our UNITAR colleagues, welcome, would tell you that at this point, it's becoming more and more centralized as the hub for multilateral diplomacy and really giving people experience in what it's like to be in the UN, to be affiliated with the UN. Though, of course, there can be no guarantee by being part of UNITAR that we can get a UN position, but it is definitely the place to network and to get started. All right, so again, 28 September is our start. We are getting close. That will be the first week. Again, if folks don't have time at this point to do a full visa application, perhaps the online element is the best. But then if there's some kind of pacing, because the program goes over all year, I always encourage those who can to come for as many of the modules as possible. And as you know probably from the application page, C1 English is necessary. There's 2 years of law-related experience or a law-related, well, to start with a law degree or equivalent. This program is meant to take people who started this career, who've begun work, or who are at the front of seeking a different career in international law to really help them push forward, both academically and in terms of connection. All right, so what again do we study? The core fields, we'll talk about those: international human rights, introduction to public international law, international humanitarian law, the law of war, which it sounds odd, doesn't it? But it includes things like targeting as well as the treatment of civilians. What does it mean to be an international organization that has personality? What does it mean to have rights above and beyond either a state or as people in the system? Then there's a lot of comparison and theory. The UNITAR block modules, we'll go over them. They occur throughout the year. The very first is 5 full days. All of the others, which I can provide a calendar for, they're set, or we can look here to some degree. All of the others are 3 days, 2 days at times, but we surround those events with our site visits. So we will see the OSCE. We'll visit places like OPEC. We'll go to the fundamental rights headquarters here in Vienna. So let me show you that as well. The next thing is that some of the UN modules, very pointedly, are what I would call intentionally practitioner-oriented, right? Writing, argumentation, negotiation, even things like game theory. In addition to something that I was not in my career as a US lawyer, I'll back up for 1 second. I practiced law in the United States for over 25 years, went back and got after doing international law at the front end, an LL.M in the United States in human rights law, and then a European here, international LL.M in public international law. I was not very good at this next element, which is policy brief writing. The United Nations and international organizations have a way of writing that requires you to condense grand proposals into 4 pages, 5 pages, with graphics, with flowcharts, make it simple, make the policy decision maker happy, and get it to you. And then, of course, we'll talk about the master seminar again and the thesis. All right, so what does our calendar look like, right? We're right here starting 28 September. The very first semester kicks off with what I would call now more of a European-American hybrid set of courses. So we have all of the courses start. Some of them overlap. You'll see a natural week. But you can see here in between, the courses start October. But the global diplomacy module is already set. That's a UN campus module. The conflict analysis module occurs before the end of December. That's another UN module on campus. November and December, we will also try and have as many site visits. Again, I know everyone can participate, but for folks who can be here, I always encourage the most possible around these UN sessions that you can be here, because we will go to many, many institutions. All right, then in the European tradition, we go over winter break, and our first semester ends on the backside, right? In January, you'll have a month of taking the recent challenges course, and then you're often running to what I would call a very few courses. We've reduced the courses second semester so that people can focus on the thesis, right? What happens here is there's 2 more UN modules, but then the rest of the year is very much around, though I encourage folks, don't wait. Try and get it done earlier than that. But the rest of the year is around designing the thesis, writing the thesis, researching, getting feedback, and then turning it in to try and graduate within the very first year. And to do that, the year ends on 31 August. There is a grace year. I encourage people not to take it, but you can, we can. There's 1 year on the backside where only for the payment of student fees, which is not tuition, I think it's like 50 euros for the second year, you can remain enrolled to finish the thesis if need be. The graduation date here is always the date the thesis is defended successfully. So that can occur, let's say you roll over 31 August, you might very well defend and graduate in December or February. You don't have to wait, even though the graduation ceremony is the next November. Okay, what does a week look like? Right now, the way we have it scheduled, Fridays, this is good news, right? Fridays are kept open as much as possible. Those are for study, UNITAR, site visits, things we can program in between. The way we did it this year, this again, this sounds like an American stockbroker commercial. Past performance is no sign of future performance necessarily, but this year, and I'm trying to make it the same, we had 2 courses on Thursday, 1 course is on the other days across the week, so the weeks has some pattern. They don't all perfectly overlap, but they mostly run across the semester. The core curriculum, again, let's return to that. What I love, and here we are in we're not quite in the same room, are we? And we have very small groups. Online, you can do asynchronous or you can do simultaneous. I know time zones are difficult for some people because we're all over the world. If so, the lectures are available for playback. There are at times questions that the professor will post simply to make sure everybody's following the class. And we're going to make even greater effort this year so that people who do work asynchronously can pose questions, discuss topics, participate fully. So there should be no difference. I'm trying to make it the least difference possible. But if one can participate live, that is beautiful, because you can then ask questions, just like we're doing today, with our remote system. And it gives you the opportunity to interact more. And of course, for all those folks who can be in Vienna, it's a very traditional classroom environment, which I love. But I encourage, again, people who can come in 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. If you're surrounding yourself with some of these UN modules, please hybrid attend the classes if you want to as well. So what are the classes, right? The very first is Sources of Public International Law. That we've already talked about. What is international law? But this is going to focus you on what are the underlying elements, like we talked about in the International Court of Justice, Article 38. The article provides for this hierarchy. What does it mean for a state to breach its duties? Who creates law? How are you bound? It's the fundamentals of the entire year. The second course up here on the screen is that you'll focus on human rights. So the question is, if in the old system, public international law, like I said, ran state to state, and somewhat after World War II, we've moved into a new environment where for the first time coming out of the Holocaust, the experience of World War II, human rights picked up a more state to individual and state to state for individual way of thinking. You'll study that. Professor Benedict has been the professor. I believe he's repeating this year. A phenomenal professor, very famous in terms of what he's done here in Europe. In Austria, he's at University of Graz, but travels up for us frequently. All right, international humanitarian law. Again, I already hinted at this, but what is it? It is the Geneva Conventions writ large. So at this point, we're looking at how do you treat civilians? What does it mean to have non-state actor and state actor conflicts? State-to-state conflicts have certain rules, the high seas, interstate conflicts. How do these all, in theory, provide rights and obligations in terms of warfare? And then today, it's interesting from a military perspective, a lot of drone warfare, human targeting, things that I would call remote systems are coming into play in this paradigm. How do we keep human control, or do we, over weapons? Recent Challenges is a course that actually presents each of our students with an opportunity to take something, to take a topic, almost a pre-thesis topic, and run with it. Develop a paper, present it, defend it. It can be related to the thesis, or it can be something completely different. But it gives you a chance to present an argument over something that's a hot topic. That's the way I would call it at this point. And then really practice what it means to do a defense. International organizations, again, it's a little bit surprising to people trained in civil law and even common law, but international organizations, but for a very few, one of which is famous and here in Austria, are usually created by treaty and have their own personality, their own rights, their own obligations. They exist in this intermediate zone. We have states, we have people, and we've talked about they work in international law. And now in between, we have states creating corporate people or international organizations. Comparative public law, Professor Lockmeyer here always says we decide what we're comparing, and he has interesting graphics. We want to pull something often from one system, hold it steady, and think how it applies to another system. It can be a regional system, it can be a national system, it can be anything that you think at this point we should compare in terms of public international law. What can we learn, what can we add to the field by thinking of different aspects? So for example, I've done research on comparing the inter-American human rights system to the European human rights system, multi-level. And the question is, what do they do the same? What do they do differently? Does it matter? Are they heading to the same teleological end? Do they want the same thing? Do they want different things? How do they accomplish them? So comparative is a big aspect. Regional organizations, we have a course in comparing Europe as an actor, or in the past we've also looked at other regions, the inter-American, the African systems. We move into international relations. And I've said this before, if you've heard one of my presentations, I always like to say my son is in the academy at the Leiden University in The Hague, studying international relations. Sometimes I think he did it to spite me because he wanted to go into a different field, but I love it. No, it's the real power politics, maybe the counterpoint, right, to what we study. How do states behave, and what theories do we have apart from law? And for me, having come out of theology, which I did a master's degree in, there's all kinds of sociological, anthropological theories at play here and how states behave that you can deploy. What's the lens we use? What is the nature of how we look at state relations, right? Constructivism, which you don't often hear, post-constructivism, all of these narrative theories, they come into play for the first time in this course. One thing that I love to think about is, do the stories that nations tell themselves, do the things we make up about our polity, do the things we tell our children about who we are and we tell other states, do those matter in how we behave? Do those control the future? Or is it pure power politics? Or is it some combination? Let's move back to modules. I know most people, many people want to make sure that the on-the-ground experience is exactly what they want. So again, experience 1, 28 September. We're getting close. I encourage everyone, of course, who wants to apply without over-stressing it, apply quickly, because we are getting close to this. But we open in the UN, obviously. The Vienna International Center here is a tremendous asset. We have, and we're getting more, numerous organizations, including many from the Atomic Energy Commission and Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. We also have crime, UNITAR, which is actually controlling trafficking, trying to address things like transnational crime, you will get introduced to what happens on the ground here in Vienna. And you'll get to be in on the ground. It's a wonderful experience. So the next one. Here is Ambassador Regazzoni. Did he teach last year for those who are here? Ambassador Regazzoni was, he's done multi-years here. He's a fantastic person. He teaches from the ground. He has had decades of practice in diplomacy and his positions. He shares what it's like to be a diplomat, what it's like to be in a negotiation for a treaty. How does one even sit? What does the flag order mean? How do you exit? I mean, those aren't the whole thing, but those are the interesting things in some sense. So how do we advise? How do we negotiate? How do we brief? Those are topics here. Then we do conflict analysis and resolution. Often that means, how do we deploy a peacekeeping force? What does that mean? How do we deploy something less than a peacekeeping force? Are there elements to what the United Nations can do to solve problems at the different levels, and how does it work? And then finally, Dr. Nora Meyer does this, what I already hinted at, negotiation skills workshop. Interesting, BATNA. What is your basic bottom line, and how do you bring it to negotiation, and how do you set the parameters of what you negotiate? This is theory. It's not just diplomacy. This is theory of how you interact with someone in a multilateral world or in a friendly world to actually push forward representing yourself, representing your nation, but also being diplomatic in the sense that you're actually listening. And where does that get us? This is a famous example from, again, sociology, anthropology, religion, ethics, the trolley bus consortium. You'll do all kinds of exercises in terms of how does one organize themselves? How do you represent yourself? So I can't recommend it enough. Now, on to what we did this year more, and next year, I cannot promise, but it is under plans right now. We're trying to do optional for students who wish to come, or for students who are here, out-of-town visits. All of these have been making sure that we can take advantage of Vienna. But in future years, we're going to take advantage even more of Europe. So we're trying to arrange a visit for students to Brussels and a visit to Geneva. That's on the agenda. I'm trying to get those locked down and see if it's something everybody would like to do, what the cost is, and if we can do it. But again, the easy ones, because we're here, we're in Vienna, we're in the international city. So last year we got to go to OPEC. OPEC will very carefully tell you that it is not a cartel. You'll learn that it is actually an organization dedicated to keeping oil prices stable. But though Austria is not a member of OPEC, of course, it's the hosting nation. So the headquarters for OPEC is right here in our backyard. We were not able to go 2 years ago and the year prior, but last year we got in. I fully intend that the next cohort will be able to go. It's a good experience. We actually got to meet people in the legal department and have more of an in-depth visit than some of the visits that we do. The other institutions, again, we went out of town a little bit. It's perhaps 45 minutes away, but the International Anti-Corruption Academy is here, a training ground for customs agents, security personnel, border people, government officials around the world in what it means to have a system that internally fights corruption. So a tremendous training academy. They offer their own short-term degrees. We get to interact with, learn from, and see what they're doing as well as meet them. The World Bank has an office here. We got to go to the World Bank. Really good experience. This office is focused, of course, more on the European area. One thing that folks don't really focus on until we get there is that the World Bank is about long-term development, whereas the IMF, which is also very important, is about short-term stability. So you can learn what it means for what the World Bank does here. This year we got through connections at least to see, he wasn't in his office, but we got to see and tour the presidency here for Austria and actually go in what would have been our equivalent of the Oval Office. I have to say it's a little bit less secure than trying to get there in the United States, but very cool to see. The EU Agency for Fundamental Rights, and I'll keep going, we already talked about the OSCE. the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe is one of the biggest remaining institutions in which Russia is at least talking to the outside world. Everyone has a veto, so we can debate in international law how effective it is, but at least everyone's talking. And we get to see, or we saw last year, a session in action. We get to meet with the legal staff and with the policy staff, and we'll do that again, of course. The Permanent Court of Arbitration, the PCA, the predecessor to the International Court of Justice, has an office here, and it's become almost more active, maybe more active than the International Court itself in a sense, in terms of dispute settlement. And we can learn about that. You get to meet people who do that. You get to set up those. We have a worldwide set of panels of people who are nominated by their nations, and then the local offices coordinate this dispute panels. And you get to hear both the private, the development, and the even state-to-state disputes that can occur. We have a migration office here for IOM, and then of course, I can't stress enough, being on campus at the United Nations itself. All right, so some wonderful pictures here from this year. We again, you can see us here at OSCE, at the World Bank, at IOM. I think these experiences are almost as enriching, and I hope to keep doing them and develop them further. As the coursework, as the UN modules, I see them all as a package. Here's our visit to the federal presidency, ornate. This is exactly where you would usually see the president giving, I don't know if you see it on social media all the time, but our speeches, very calm, very presentable. And then the Corruption Academy and the PCA, the Permanent Court of Arbitration, are in these pictures. So, I also want to stress it's not just meeting people in these institutions. It's not just networking. It's not just the UN. It's not just learning. But there's an experience here to be had. So this year, again, the social aspect I cannot stress enough. The chance to meet your peers and to do things together is phenomenal. One thing we did a little bit outside of the normal, but not too far. I can make it apply. We went to both into the sewer and to the museum for The Third Man, which is a movie about 1945, 1955 Vienna, post-occupation. It's an interesting, one could write papers. I think there's political science papers embedded in this, maybe even sociology, about what it meant for the occupation. How did Austria emerge to be a neutral country? What does neutrality mean? Those are backgrounds to the real filming here, right? The real filming is showing the rubble, the devastation. We forget the beauty around us. This 10-year period when Austria was reforming, the movie just, I mean, of course it's a drama, but the movie itself shows both what the deprivation was like, what the community was like, and how Vienna kind of picked itself up, how Austria picked itself up. More important, small cohorts, social groups, the chance to see things, and of course, what would Vienna be without a ball? I had never been to balls. It's not something I often do in the United States. I'm also a national of South America, Uruguay. I can't say I've been to an Uruguayan ball either, but this was last year's cohort at the Sigmund Freud University ball. It's an experience. I've said before, and I can repeat it here, that it's not just the Pride and Prejudice style 1800s ballroom. It is, but there's all kinds of bars and even current music rooms going on all over the place. And if you really feel like it, though I couldn't make it, you can stay out until at least 3, I think it was 3 in the morning. I can't do it. All right, back to the master's thesis. So what concludes this program of study? What kind of caps it? What makes the end? It's the chance for you to write something to defend. Early on, you don't have to have it today as you apply, but very early on, I always encourage, try and think about what motivates you. What if you had a natural desire, now this might sound odd, but if you could just research and read and write and develop something your own and push the field forward on your own with supervision, what do you want to do? What do you want to study? That's the question here. The thesis, you choose a topic, you choose a supervisor as early as possible. You can choose any supervisor who teaches in the program. So the faculty at Sigmund Freud, the visiting faculty, you can choose any with approval, qualified PhD in the European system. In the world we haven't had, but in the European system certainly, with approval from the university. You register your thesis, it gets approved, and you get into research and writing. So, in today's world, it's still important to self-develop these ideas. It's about 150,000 characters in English for the writing. You don't have to. It was new to me. I've used Blue Book or APA for my entire life before I moved to Europe 2 years ago. Here we have the Oxford, the Oskala standard. But again, consistency, length, format, all very easy to do. Once, for example, you could work on this over December, January. A lot of people kick off on it, working very hard starting February, March. If you want to meet the first graduation deadline, like I said, the August 31 deadline is the key to get it done in the first year. Otherwise, you're in the grace year. And then when you graduate formally, is simply based on which of those 2 years you're in, but when you graduate by date is the date of the defense. So you submit, you get a signed declaration of authenticity. It's been an interesting experience in this world. I am an avid user of technology, to say the least. I am an avid user of artificial intelligence in the right way, but currently one thing I think we're all going through in university is to make sure that everyone's work is their own, that we're using technology and not relying on it to think for us. So there's a Turnitin check, some source checking, really make sure that the integrity is there, that everyone is building their own ideas. How we build our ideas is new. How we think is new. How we can pull sources together new. But again, coming up with our defense, coming up with our thesis is still to be the element of self-thought. So, interesting. Comes through Turnitin, goes to the evaluation. The dean, the vice dean currently approves it, goes to your supervisor, and once the 2 weeks go by, we can set a defense date, assuming the grades go well, which of course they will. The defense is an hour, very European format, 10 to 15 minutes, and I encourage people, don't go over. Don't go over. 10 to 15 minutes to present the thesis and the rest to answer questions. You'll then get a timeout in the room, come back in and get your final grade, and shortly thereafter graduate. So, again, we've already talked about the formalities. I always want to stress we can do this more. I want to leave plenty of time for questions. But again, the key to a thesis here or in other institutions is going to be specificity. Right? Sometimes people come in with broad questions. I wanted to do this. I wanted to do this in the past. I could write 500 pages in a book beyond a doctoral dissertation. But the point is to come up with a thesis, as you can see from these two, the weak and the strong, that focuses on a very specific question. 50 pages of writing is not, in some sense, it feels daunting, but it's not that long. So it needs a very pointed thesis. It needs something also, to say never has been done perhaps is too strong, but has not been explored and exhausted is very true. So to find a specific topic within the range that can be done, but also needs to be something that has not been looked into. We can work on that together. I'm always here to give advice. The supervisors are here to give advice. We can help found that and really make sure that it's a topic that you're comfortable with and that actually satisfies these requirements. All right, so again, we already talked about thesis dates. I say that 1 August of the second year is a realistic date to shoot for to graduate. But 31 August is the legal date, and I'll do everything I can to make sure folks can march if they meet this deadline. This is the deadline for meeting the first year requirement, not doing the grace period. And the defense, again, can actually go over that boundary without incurring a different year. It's interesting, it comes up, it matters to some people who are not in the European system. It came to me lately that our master's program is a 1-year program. In Europe, our educational system and our employment system are used to 2-year master's programs. The key is our master's is an international master's. It's therefore a 1-year but fully accredited European 60 ECTS LL.M master's degree. It qualifies for this thing called ISCED level 7, which is the degree immediately before pursuing a PhD. So there is no difference on the ground between this 1-year international master's for your future and pursuing a full 2-year normal German, Austrian master's program. Might it take a little explanation? Yes, because this is new. This is somewhat new to Austria. We have recently, only somebody of my age can say that, in the last 20 years, introduced the private university system. So within this system, we are internationalizing the programs further, and we're introducing a slightly different way to get to level 7, but it fully qualifies. All right, let me talk about tuition, because I want to be completely honest and transparent before we take questions. Many people in today's world need assistance on the tuition, but there is none at this moment that we have at Sigmund Freud. And the truth about the world, even though I've talked to UNITAR and the United Nations at length, in today's budget crisis world of United Nations financing, there's no UNITAR opportunity here either. So I know we're facing a crisis of availability, of funding, but I want to make sure that you know that other than pursuing, which I encourage, this is what I encourage, please do, your own homework, your own research. Is there anything for folks coming from outside the EU that you can find to help meet this? We encourage you to bring that to us. Is there anything in Europe you can find? Please pursue it, but please also know, as much as it actually honestly breaks my heart, because I want all of you to come, that there is no assistance at this moment from UNITAR, from the United Nations, nor from the university. So what do we normally do? The fee is divided by semester as 85.69 in euros. There's normally a deposit that occurs within 2 weeks of being admitted, but with permission of our finance department, we can talk about whether people want to pay that in 4 payments, pay it in 2 payments, even pay it after the deposit currently monthly. So all of that is possible to discuss. If after you apply and if you get admitted, these are options that help, then let's talk about it. We are here to help structure, and I want to help structure, and we will fight to structure the best we can. But I do want to say there's no current scholarship available. All right, so we've passed our non-EU deadline clearly. We give ourselves that buffer so that if students want to attend in person, there's plenty of time to pursue visa requirements. If our students want to do, well, either they're coming from the Schengen area or they have visa access for 90 days, then of course the deadline's open. And for the hybrid and online program, of course the deadline is still open. We are normally accepting applications till 31 August. Please be in touch with us since that requirement is coming right up. If you need more time, we might be able to provide it, but I strongly encourage, please get applications in on our online system as quickly as possible, if you can. All right, let's move into questions. I promised online that we'd have plenty of time for questions. I think we've gone 40 minutes, so if there are questions online or in the room, please let me know. I will try and watch. Or our Director of Admissions is online as well, and Deidre will also help me coordinate if folks want to raise your hand or jump in.
We have a few questions on chat, Andrew.
Yes.
Mostly, actually, the beginning was all about work experience and educational background.
Yes.
So, for example, from Humayun Kabir, we have this question. He completed a Master's of Police Science,
yes,
which focused on criminal law, international human rights law, and humanitarian law and jurisprudence. He doesn't have an LL.B, which is fine because those are related. Mm-hmm. He possesses 8 years of professional experience in policing. Is he eligible for this program?
Yes.
Yeah.
To answer the question generally, because it applies to a lot of people, the requirements are for the degree equivalent to an LL.B in law or a related field. We will look at non-LL.B on an application-by-application basis, but when students apply, simply explain, and we will see whether the degree carries with it what we would think is an entry requirement for a public international law program. But there are a lot of ways to satisfy that as long as it's equivalent to an LL.B or a law degree. Then I would love to take a look, we would love to take a look as a committee at the equivalence. And then in terms of work experience, normally, again, 2 years in something we would consider law-related, but that's a very open term, isn't it? Public international law, legal, diplomacy, anything that in the application package explain why you think your professional experience has brought you to this point, we would love to take a look at it. So again, basically LLB or equivalent law-related, or in other studies at the same level, the more you can show law classes, coursework, public international law, we will certainly investigate. And then the work experience, well, at 8 years in a related field, wonderful. But let us look at each one as best we can.
We had another one, which is a little bit different. So we have Giyamba. He has a bachelor's degree in agronomy and a master's degree in agricultural engineering, which are totally different fields. But he currently works in international legal and judicial cooperation at the Office of the Attorney General of Mozambique. The admissions requirements mention a degree in law or comparable qualification with his academic background combined with his professional experience to be considered a comparable qualification for admission to this LL.M. So it's agronomy and agricultural engineering. But he does have experience working with the Attorney General of Mozambique.
Yeah. Let me be careful not to say I can guarantee admission. But in terms of if that agronomy degree is equivalent to a European 4-year degree, international 4-year degree, the more we could see law-related coursework, there might not be, then it would be offset by law-related experience and what you're describing in the work experience. I would say please apply. Again, the guidelines are to make sure that people will benefit from a law program, that they'll be able to hit the ground running, understanding international law. We don't want to put people back in terms of starting with zero introduction to what it means to be a lawyer, a public international lawyer, a diplomat, someone working in an NGO. But I have to admit, even from what I've heard, there's lots of ways to get there and be totally qualified to be here. The goal, there's kind of a gold standard in a way. It's a center point. The program's designed for advancing people in law. How you get here, please put the application in. Let us take a look at it. Let us talk about it as faculty. Make sure that it meets the minimum requirements, and then that what you've done and what you've studied, we think, will prepare you and also benefit, you will benefit from this program as well. So again, do I sound, what I would say is over and over, please, if you believe that you can fit within the 4-year LLB equivalency with law experience and 2 years of international related experience, please put forward the application. Don't self-select, don't hesitate. I think it's much better to put in all of your credentials and let us talk to you. Let us take a look.
Great. The other questions are about the scholarship, which you already addressed earlier, and the tuition fee, which I already answered, and then an accommodation question, which
yes.
I also already answered. There's one request from Humayun. Would you mind sharing this open lecture through email, maybe the presentation?
Oh, absolutely. I will. I'm not sure if you all have my direct email. We can make that available, and this PDF of the slides is available on our website, so we can distribute that again. Deidre will help me make sure I get the URL right, but it's currently on our website in the full PDF deck of what we just went through. But more importantly, feel free to email admissions, email me, and we'll answer questions based on what you see in these decks as well.
From Tom, now that the deadline for studying on campus for non-EU students has passed, if one applies now and wants to study on campus, can it be possible? I can answer that, Tom. Yes. It depends on how fast you can get your visa. So if you, it depends on, unfortunately, your nationality will dictate if you are able to enter Austria without a visa, or if you need to apply for an entry visa, which can take anywhere from 2 months to 7 months. A short-term visa generally should only take, in general, 4 to 8 weeks, but in some places it can take longer. So it depends. I probably wouldn't recommend applying right now for a student residence permit. Depending on the country, that takes anywhere from 3 to 7 months. But if you would like to go on a short-term visa to join the immersion weeks, then that is probably going to be a better option, a faster option. But yeah, it really depends. I mean, if you apply now and you're admitted, it really depends where you are and which nationality you have, because there are certain countries that admittedly have a longer queue for the appointment for submitting a student residence permit or even a visa application. So from Kenya, I would say a student residence permit is out of the question now because it'll take anywhere from 7 months to 1 year, unfortunately. This has been my experience. But if you apply for a short-term visa, that might work. You might be late for the September immersion week, but you can probably still join for future immersion weeks.
That's phenomenal. And everyone's a little tired of my research work. This is exactly the issue that I do most of my international law, and I call it the birth lottery, and I stole that from a gentleman here at Central European University. It's not just, it's not fair. It's like the cards have been distributed in terms of these passport issues, and my research focuses on what do remote frontiers and what do borders mean today. And in fact, the next lecture example coming up in a week from now is on a paper I'm presenting in Graz on academic freedom, remote borders, and this passport craziness, right? It's really an interesting current dilemma for us. Okay, that's enough academics. The reality is exactly as said. It's for some nationalities very difficult in terms of the student residency. But short-term visas, again, based on each country of origin, right? To join as many hybrid weeks as possible would be wonderful.
A question from LK. When is the next immersion week after the first one?
It is October. Let me go back to that.
Yes, thank you. And also the first week, I think, is the last week of September or the first week of October?
So we have September 28th.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then what did we schedule for the second? Let me make sure I'm giving you just the right one. It was late October last year, but it might be early November this year. If I could get back to my slides, let's see.
Yeah, I think it would be nice to join at least one immersion week for students. Yeah.
Yeah, week
yeah,
one
there
is
you go.
28 September to 2 October. That's the full first UN training week. The next is a little bit later this year, 10 to 11 November. I can send anybody who wants the full schedule. We're doing this one, it looks like the very first week of December. These move back and forth a few weeks, but you can see the first three are spaced across the first 3 months. And the site visits, again, will be around those dates on either side usually, so that if people can travel, you can see Vienna institutions and do the UN at the same time.
Are there any immersion weeks, Andrew, in the next semester as well? Are they on?
There
should be, right? Yeah.
We're all the way over in March. 22 March would be the next one because of the way winter break works. And then we'll have one more in early April.
Perfect. Sorry, LK, I hope you heard that. There should be an opportunity to join an immersion week, even if it's not this year, at least for the next semester. Marta Almeida asked, for working professionals, how does it work to follow the program and the immersion weeks as well as the study visits? I noticed the professor has a way of evaluating participation in classes, or each professor has a way of evaluating participation in class.
Yes. So again, there's asynchronous and synchronous, to use overly complicated terms, right? For people who can, the classes occur across the day, mid-morning to early evening Vienna time. They're all live streamed just like this is happening and participatory. But for people as far away as Seattle, Washington, or sometimes people in the far east, and if we have Philippines, even to Japan, it makes the time zone very difficult, so everything is available for streaming. It's the streaming that's a little bit harder because one needs to then participate often in a sample questionnaire that the professor posts that I hate to say prove, but it kind of keeps the student engaged in what happened in the class and occurs right after restreaming the class. This year we're going to popularize even more what can occur, which is the teams. So you can participate in discussions. We're going to try and make more and more channels open for people who are outside the time zone. So again, the program is designed for working professionals, right? We've had many this year, including people working right here in Vienna. They have participated at different levels, taking time off work for some of the immersion weeks and trying to work around some of the classes. But again, the classes are going to be, it's a little bit of a hit or miss in terms of people's work schedule, how the classes are laid out. Anything you can attend live, of course, please do so. But the whole point of the course is to make it available to people who need to be remote and people who are working full-time.
Sorry.
Yes?
Is there a price difference if you attend the courses in person or hybrid or virtually only?
No, it's. Let me back up. It's exactly the same. From in the room, the question is there a price difference based on hybrid, online, or in person? And the tuition and the fees are exactly the same for each version of the program. So we've had many students do 100% online and not have the opportunity to come and benefit. Some of the very first defenders of theses last year were people working, of all places, from South Sudan, right in the middle of a conflict zone, right? Not able to travel here at all. But I think they spoke very highly of the program. But again, to answer your real question, no. There's no price difference between the different ways of doing it. It's all the same. Yes?
Thanks. I was wondering, what is the average class size for this degree?
So last year, class size, let me answer that two different ways. The cohorts are between 18 and 22 people. Whether how many are in Vienna or how many are in Vienna is an open question, right? This year's class had a fairly good number of people from Vienna itself. I would say we've got a graduate of last year, or a soon-to-be graduate of last year's class here in the room with us. I would think that on an average physical day, we had 5 to 7 Vienna students in class. Would that sound about right? And then the goal is to have 7 or more online. That gives us maybe the 15 out of 20. The rest are doing the playback of the class as they can. So I would say 75% would be my goal live, but it's really up to who can and when they can. And then a little bit of a kind of a random shuffle, right? Like how many people each year fall in Vienna and can be in Vienna. We had in this cohort many people who graduated law school from Austria who joined the program. In the prior year, we had almost no one who graduated from Austria in the program. So it really depends on the mix and how many people fall in either the residence permit or simply live in the EU to start with. But again, I would say, okay, how would I frame the question? Participation in a class, live, 12 to 15. People in class, 5 to 7 at times. All right, more in the room or online questions that we can handle. Thank you for being here, by the way.
There are currently no more questions on chat.
Okay.
I think we answered everything, I think. Yeah.
Wonderful.
But yes, if you have, I think they would like a copy of the presentation, and I think I checked attendance, except for the few people who don't really, who didn't display their name. I have no idea where they are on the attendance list. So if I don't see the first name and last name, or if I only see a number, I wouldn't be able to identify you. Or if you only have a nickname or initials, it's hard for me to identify who you are. You could, of course, email us, and I can get a copy of the presentation from Mr. Mansfield here, and then send it to you if you need a copy. I'm the one who sent the reminder this 2 hours ago. I sent a reminder by email, so you just have to reply to that email and let me know if you'd like a copy, and I can get one from Mr. Mansfield.